Right, I'm here with the very large Banana Hobby X-Fly B1b. Said I'd make a setup video for what I'm doing with this plane. I've done a few things to it to change it up from its stock configuration. I run Jeti, so I'm trying to keep the first part of this. I am going to keep the first part of this very general. If you have any kind of advanced radio, they suspect they all do it. But these are things that I've done to the plane. I fly off of grass, so I have a lot more flaps than standard. And then a few other things, like I've added, I don't have the lights all plugged in. I've got a switch on the landing lights, so I can turn them on when I'm ready for takeoff and turn them off when I turn off. I've got Chris Wolf RC Geek's brilliant center burners installed. I don't have them. I don't have the battery in there for that, but if you've seen the pictures I put up on this thing, it's a really great addition. Also, physically to the plane, I have cut out where the stab bumps the servo. That's the rudder servo. And there's a little bit there for the elevator servo. That gets me a fair bit more upstab than otherwise. Other than that, I'm running full bypass. The gyro's still in there, but it's not running the flight controls anymore. It still does run the flaps. I didn't feel like manually programming that because it works fine. But I've got separate channels for each aileron and one for the nose wheel steering, just because I had a channel that was free. And it's kind of handy to be able to tell your nose wheel steering for what you're doing. So very broadly, what I've done is whenever the flaps come down, we'll come over here. Yeah, let's do this. I really practiced hard for this video. The ailerons droop as well. In the full-scale plane, they don't have ailerons. The whole wing trailing edge is a flap. I'm not quite matching the flap throw with the ailerons, but it's pretty close. It really helps get off the grass much easier. And if you're curious about how much, it's about a half inch at the point here, and then half flaps I'm running about a 1/4 inch. And the ailerons are just a little bit less. One of the reasons I wanted to bypass the gyro, I didn't like how the stab just jumped when the wing swept. So now it takes a fair bit of stab trim with all those flaps and ailerons out. You can see how much it moves. It may even need a little more than that. So that matches the speed of the flaps. It also matches the speed of the wing sweep. It's a 5-second cycle. So you can see it's not perfect, it's not a linear transition, but it's very close to what it needs. What you couldn't see while I was doing that is that I have a little reflex on the ailerons as well. They move up about 1/8 of an inch when the wings sweep, again in a 5-second cycle, to help take some load off the tail. And they work with the stab. I've noticed it definitely, you can tell, it definitely helps. So with the ailerons reflexing as well as the 5-second transition, the plane transitions really well. You've got to be going pretty fast, if anybody who's flown this knows, but it doesn't jerk up like it did with the stock setup. And you can see with the wings swept, it's a fair bit of elevator travel, but there's not much left after you sweep the wings. So ailerons really help out with that. And then it's a 5-second, I'll show you the ailerons slowly coming down. So as the wings come back up, the aileron slowly trails back into its position. And now it's an aileron again. Looks like there's a little bit of aileron trim in there. And so that's about it. For rates and all, since rates are pretty much universal, looks like with the flaps out, got 22% expo in the ailerons, 95%, so I come off 100% in the elevator, 45% expo, and then the rudder's toned down to 60% and 20. I could probably turn that up a little bit on the rudder. Also, nose wheel steering is set for 50% with a 15% expo. I find it works pretty nicely. With the wings back, let's see, with the wings, let's go half flaps, 20%, 50%, 20%, and then 35% expo on the ailerons with the flaps up, the wings are still out. 50% on the elevator and 25% on the rudder. And with Jeti, I don't remember what JR or Spectrum does, but this is obviously the expo that softens the center, not the other kind of expo. And with the wings swept, let's see what we get. Ailerons go to 95% with a 30% expo, 50% in the elevator, and 15% on the rudder. Ailerons, I could probably bump those up. Actually, I'm gonna do that now. Bring those back up to 100. All right. For the gyro rates, I'm not running very high. It's, I think, 20% and 25% on the elevator. That'll be, I'm sure, subject to however you have your gyro set up. As many have said, this doesn't really need a gyro. I had the receiver, and it does smooth it out nicely. One then is that one. Yep, gain of 20 and then 25 on rudder, actually. And the rudder one seems to work the nose wheel steering as well. So that's it. The basics are I've set up the ailerons to work as flaperons. It does look much cooler coming into land with full span flaps, which is what the scale is. And the stab moves in sync with the wings. And that was a lot to get there. So that's what it does for the Jeti users. How did I get there? That's where this becomes a much longer video. Let's get out of there. So the model, I have the servos set up, throttle's 100%, ailerons are 100%. The rudder, I set for maximum throw without binding. And I put the positives, the max limits as well for whenever the gyro is doing its thing. Flaps, this sets, it's kind of a weird setup. There's, I think, other ways to do this, but this just sets the flaps up to where when the wing sweeps and the gyro puts the flaps up, that's where the flaps up is, and then that gives me about a half deflection for takeoff. Elevator, I've done a few mods to the elevator. Let's see. I've cut into it. There you go, to clear the servo. And that gave me a fair bit more throw. And then these, those numbers there are what keeps it from bumping into the servos. Everything else is 100%. All right, fine tuning. This is where it gets weird. There are a lot of flight modes that I have set up for this. Looks like there's 5. This is why I've done it this way. You have a 5-second delay in sweep and unsweep, because that moves the stab and now the ailerons whenever they're when they're moving up with the sweep of the wing. But you don't want that 5 seconds when the flaps are coming up. So when we're going from takeoff to flaps up, that's only a 1-second delay. I have the flaps slow just because it's cool. They're more or less synced. So 5 seconds to get the wings in and out, and then all of the takeoff, landing, the flap movements are all 1 second. Not really sure where we're gonna go with all this. Let's go to flight mode trim. I have, there's 2 things you have to do to make flight mode trim work and work in the way we want it to. I have it set up as separate. I'm gonna turn off the airplane so the wings aren't sweeping while I'm going through all this. If you couldn't tell, there was 0 rehearsal with this video. This is a low effort video. I'm not a YouTuber, despite having a YouTube channel, apparently. Turn that off. All right, flight mode trim. Here's how this is all done. I have ailerons and elevator as separate instead of global. Whenever I sweep the wings, ailerons go up 28%, or minus, which is up. Elevator goes trailing edge up 50%. It shows immediately on here, but because of that 5-second delay that we put in the flight modes, it actually takes 5 seconds. So one thing you have to do is the separate allows for separate trims for different flight modes, Nobody else gets separate trims, just the ailerons and the elevator. And then you have to go to function curves and flight mode delay. Ailerons, elevator, and rudder. I forget why rudder's in there, but that allows the function curves and then the trim to move with the delay of the flight mode. A lot of this was from Harry Curzon's video of the F-14. I didn't figure this out on my own. Harry's the Jeti master. Some of this, though, is adapted from that. Some of it I just made up. I'm sure there's a better way to do it. This is the way that works for me. So we have flight mode delay. When the wings go in, the wings go out. That flight mode delay affects two things. It affects the stab, which is where the elevator here, and affects the ailerons. Because I reflex the ailerons, the wings go back. Again, I don't remember why rudder's in there. Probably doesn't need to be. So those two things allow the stab to move slowly instead of just jumping. And as a result, I can more or less just put the wings in and out in level flight without the plane moving around. All right, as I was talking about logical switches, I realized that one of them was unnecessary because I had changed something and, well, didn't change everything. So let's go back to the flight modes. I've got 5, which actually there's a 6th one hiding down there. That's the default mode. That should actually be unsweep, but I didn't figure it out until the end. And so instead of just copying it or whatever, I just left it hang out at the bottom where it never gets, there's no way for it to ever become the default mode, and even if it did, it's just a copy of this landing. All right, so 5 flight modes, because there's kind of 5 conditions. You've got takeoff, which is half flaps with the ailerons drooped. You've got landing, which is full flaps and the ailerons droop some more. You've got flaps up with the wings out. You have the wing sweep back, and then you have a wing unsweep. So unsweep and flaps up are actually the same configuration. The wings are out, the flaps are up, but unsweep needs 5 seconds to go from sweep to unsweep, whereas flaps up only needs 1 second to go from half flaps to flaps up. So in order to get the stab to move at the 5-second rate and everything to work out well, I ended up with 5 flight modes. There's no dual rates. All the rates are tailored to the configuration of the airplane. Unsweep and flaps up are identical except for the delay, because it's the same airplane configuration. So some of them are simple. Wing sweep is just the swoop, the one I'm using for sweep, switch C. I hit that and it's wing sweep mode. I bring it back down and it goes to unsweep. And then you go half flaps to start the approach. It goes to takeoff, which is the half flaps configuration. Then you go to landing. Whenever you go from takeoff to flaps up, you only get flaps up. So there's 2 logical switches that run this. Let's have a look at them here. The first one is the one that selects flaps up. It's switch E, which is the flap switch, and switch C, which is the sweep switch. And it's the A up, B down switch. So it only activates whenever basically switch C is this way, and that goes up. Then you reset it. That resets it. It's weird, but it works. And then I've got the unsweep, which is switch E and switch C. So whenever they're in the unsweep position, which is flaps up and wings unswept, that condition goes active. You can have more than one condition happening at a time. Those are separated out by their order, and it works out great. So we go takeoff. We're in takeoff mode. You can see flaps up is also selected, but it doesn't matter. We're not, it's buried. Take off, flaps up mode. Sweep the wings, we go to wing sweep. Unsweep the wings, we go to unsweep. And then take off and landing. We go from landing, let's say we do a go around, landing straight up, it goes right back up to flaps up. Even though unsweep is still active, it's below flaps up. It's a little convoluted. This is not as cool as how Harry presents it, but this is how I got it to work. Let's see if there's anything else we can talk about. The dual rates, I think we already looked through those. We did. And that's it. If you have any questions, you could message me on whatever you're watching this on. I'll answer as best I can. If you're using something that's not Jeti, I don't know what to tell you. I'm sure Spectrum stuff and some of the more advanced radios can do all these things, but I don't have a clue. I just know how to use this, and just barely. Thanks a lot.